I'm going to do a YouTube video here for a review of all the 18 meter nationals tasks. Something I do in a lot more detail, just kind of on my own, watching what other people do and cross-checking that against notes and what I remember from the task, just to sort of learn. But I was asked to throw this up on YouTube, so I'll do a short version here and try and keep it maybe a half hour or so. Feel free to skip forward. So CD report here from Rick Shep, and this is a great reminder of the day. There was a low, not a high, in offshore in the Atlantic Ocean, which was pumping cold, dry air down from the north, Maine and Greenland. It was a huge low, and this was in place for several days. I think it had been in place a couple days before this task was run, and it was in place for at least a couple more. Very stable, weak, weird conditions, a lot of shear with height, and just difficult. So today was that day. It was a weak day. There was I'd say 8 to 17 knots out of the northwest, or northeast, depending on the altitude, and a lot of shear, a lot of turbulence in the thermals, and the thermals were very narrow, and there were still quite a few of the little sink streets. So this was a fun task to review. First, let me thank the volunteers: Rick Shep, Jane Ewing, all the people involved here were phenomenal. Franklin, Burbank, all the tow pilots, all the people who helped out. What a commitment it is to spend 10 plus days down volunteering for a contest. It's a big commitment just as a pilot, and to take the time to do this as a volunteer is enormous. So thank you to them. The task advisors were Jay Walker and myself, and Jay really set all the tasks. He's so familiar with the flying area. Let me zoom out here so you can sort of see the task here in this 2D view. Sorry, it's got a lot of flights here, so it's running a little slow. But you can see it over here. Basically a 2-lap race course with a 3K turn area around Bermuda High. The starting line is a 10K line tip to tip, and then 12K around Camden with an airport in the middle, and 12K around Bishopville. Generally pretty good landable fields, no rivers to go over, and in the middle you come back over the airport into the wind and then do it all over again and come back to the finish. And this is for 2 hours and 30 minutes, I believe. Here you can see some of the winner's traces, or this is the winner's trace. This is Gary's trace, and he went fairly deep into the first and moderately deep into the second, and won by a couple K. Let's kick over here to the scores. So there's Gary, 92, Jake Esblaw, 90 even. I was 89 and a half, and right behind me, Sean Murphy. Not a lot of points in it. You could see first through 10th, all within, let's say, 80 or 90 points. This group here, forward, other than myself, was in a gaggle. I started with Jay, but basically the top 8 minus myself flew together the entire time in a gaggle, and obviously that worked out for them. This group here, some of these guys got stuck starting late, and I think the conditions weakened late, and there were a couple did not finishes and landouts, as you can see here. So it was a fairly well called task, and the gaggle did okay, but I couldn't stand flying with the gaggle. I think the U.S. gaggle, especially in these weak conditions, can be really slow. Just people flying sensibly, but only 1 or 2 generally lead out. Everyone's happy to stay in a knot or 2 of a climb, and then you go in and you're trying to center the next climb. And today it was quite wiggly and quite a change with altitude, and so it was just very difficult. So I definitely wanted to stay away from the gaggle, or at least behind it, and that's what I did today. And we'll walk you through that, and we'll look at the lead gaggle, referencing I guess what I did a little bit. So I'll start off at 40 and get the flight started. Obviously you can see here a 3D view, we've got a barograph here, and then a 2D view, and the task is depicted. We'll look at the statistics at the end as well. So today, obviously, or not obviously, today was totally blue, if I remember correctly, so no clouds at all. No wisps, not even haze domes or anything like that. There were some birds. I can't really remember when the start gate opened exactly, but if I remember, the group waited around about a half hour, and we'll wait for some early starters here and then take a look. And the altitudes here are in meters. Generally, max altitude today was maybe 1,300 meters, so that's about 4,000, 4,200 feet, if I am doing the conversion correctly. Field elevation is 550 feet, so that's about 160, 70 meters, just for reference on some of the landouts. And that altitude is pretty consistent throughout the task area. And I'm centered on 7 Tango now, but I'll definitely move away. And I don't know why. Oh, okay, Whiskey 7's coming up now. I've had a lot of working with the files to get it all synchronized, so I'm happy to have that all good here. So basically, there was this big gaggle hanging out near the starting line, a little bit to the west, and this big gaggle over here. I happen to be in this gaggle, and it was just start gate roulette. I didn't want to start with the gaggle. I wanted to be free to find my first climb, and took a little bit of a risk to do it. I think Kilo Mike here is back over a quarry, and I go back there and leave this group. And actually the fast gaggle, I think, comes out of this side, or the main gaggle here, this 1 through 8. And they start right about the time I go back here, and then I get low and stuck over the quarry. So I start quite a bit behind. And let me flip this around so that we're looking to the south. Actually, let's do this. So now we're looking at the same orientation. I hope that's not too confusing for you. It's a little hard for me to see here. So I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see the other gaggle. And let's look at the altitudes. You can see basically everybody's peaking here at 1,000 to 1,200 meters at this point. And I'm going to pause here because it looks like we get our first starters, Alpha Sierra and QT. Alpha Sierra unfortunately lands out in the first turn area, and it was difficult to find the lift here on this leg, even on a downwind leg. So this is probably about a half hour after the start gate had opened. You can see there's two tight groups here. And here you can sort of see the start. Pretty much everybody goes downhill here into their first climbs. So they're peaking, the top guys probably dry, are getting up to maybe 1,320 meters. And here's where I'm going back to the quarry, and right then these guys take off. So I'll zoom out a little bit so we can keep track of everybody. And I'm going to just flip this around because it's going to be easier to see. So as soon as I got back here into the quarry area, I got fairly low, 873 meters, so maybe 2,600 there. So it's definitely not high enough to start. And so I was sort of trapped, and I was worried about this. I didn't realize this group had gone yet, but I suspected it. But overall, this is what I wanted to do. I just didn't want to be this far behind the group. It turned out to work okay, maybe. It certainly wasn't optimum. And I remember here the Romeo Fox, Fernando Silva group. So I finally get back up high enough, but you can see here, I'm much lower than I was before, so probably 150 meters lower. So I bought the positioning of being behind the gaggle, but fell quite a ways behind them and lost a little bit of altitude, so I certainly wasn't starting at the optimum time. These guys got stuck a little bit more back here and took a few more minutes to start, and being that late in the day, I think ends up hurting them just a little bit. So I go out here with Jay, and we have a good run down the first leg. And I'm going to zoom out here a little bit so you can see what the first gaggle did. So these guys are all well down into the first turn area. One thing I like to do is synchronize the flights based on start time, and you can sort of see how well you all ran down the first leg together, synchronized just by your start point. And Jay and I actually were a good 200-300 meters over the other guys. Even though we started low, we had a pretty darn good first run in terms of lining up lift. And we were definitely the fastest two down this first leg, down to the point where I turn here. So you can look that up and see you can run all the flights, and then you can synchronize based on start time, and you can learn some things there. Just how well did you do relative to starting at the same point. So Jay and I worked pretty well together here. A 1.5 meter climb for 500 meters, so 1,500 feet or so, and keep moving on down the leg. And I think the advantage that we had is we had really good LD, but it was a slight advantage. It wasn't like we were 10 minutes ahead or something. We did have a good run down the first leg together here, until we didn't. So these guys are taking their climbs here in the back corner. And at this point, Jay and I start to struggle a bit. I think I got a little higher than Jay. I'm at 1,060 meters here. And Jay, he's still pretty much at the same altitude here, but we unfortunately separate a little bit. And then I end up being alone. So we're both searching. We're both pretty low, down to 741. Jay's at 577, so that's 1,000 feet above the ground, basically. So we're in a pretty bad situation here. And if you look sideways, let's look here. Papa 7, for example, he's up at 1,049, so 250 meters above us. He's gone deeper into the first turn, and it was with a fast gaggle. So they're in good shape, pretty much there. We cut it a little bit short. My goal was to go to the center of everything and then time out the last two, and also to turn pretty early here if I wasn't really high, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But net even here, they went a little farther, but we've caught up quite a bit. They started a good 10 minutes in front of us, and we're basically, this is a 12K cylinder. We're only 4K a beam of them there. So we're actually ahead at this point, but low, looking for a climb. I'll zoom in here a little bit. And I do another 1.5 for 500 meters. Jay, unfortunately, has to do 1 meter a second, and that's why I separate a little bit. Now here's where I find some sort of, somewhere in here, I'm basically in wave. I'm in constant lift here, and I can't center it, so I keep moving. And here I find this 2 meters per second, which is a pretty strong climb. What is that? 4.5 knots. So on this day, that is a really strong climb. And I take it up pretty quick. And so I'm at 1577. Jay's behind another, basically 300 meters below now. So I got away from him. Didn't necessarily want to get away from him. But now I'm starting to get caught up to the gaggle here, or at least locking onto them a little bit. And that's my goal at this point, is to get to them. But this was wild. This was wave, and you could see me expanding out as I go up and realizing that I'm not really in a thermal. I'm just kind of in a big area of lift. And there you can see the expansion. And then I think I'm climbing there for a few hundred yards, a half a mile or so. And that was weird. But that got me in touch, and basically I just tried to go to the same point as the gaggle here. I knew they went a little farther, but I also knew I started later. So I'm sort of lining up and trying to gain onto them on this leg. But I'm still free and flying alone. They're about 3-4 miles ahead, and I feel like I'm in a pretty good position. I'm relatively high here at 1,300 meters, and I've got a goal ahead of me. So hopefully, if they get slow, I should at least be able to find weak lift in their climb. So here we go. We turn back upwind. You can see the trailing pack has fallen a little bit behind. Let's see, someone in there. That's Fernando Silva, for example. Let's look. He's at 1,000 meters, so they're a little low, and I think they cut this a little shorter, but they're still in the game. But of course, they've got to fly longer and later in the day because they started later. Sorry, let me turn this the right direction. So let's look back even at Papa 7 here. Go back to his last climb. There we go. So Papa 7, oh, that's going to be a miss, but I think they lined up a pretty good climb here at some point and got above, and I lost touch with them. I thought I was going to make the catch pretty quickly. And, kind of look at that pack. So everybody's in there. 5 Echo, 90, X-Ray Charlie, X-Ray Golf, Hotel 7, Mike Sierra. And they're just following the leader. And, I imagine when these guys tried to climb, it was chaos. Let's see what they find here. So there's the climb, and within 1/2 of a turn, everybody's on Papa 7. And it's got to be tough to center this lift with that big of a group. And so here's a 1.2 meter per second climb. So the climbs are already getting a little weaker in the day. This gaggle is all over each other, but they obviously, if you look here at the scores, it still turned out well, but it's maybe not the most enjoyable situation. Zoom out here a little bit. So Papa 7 pushes out away from the gaggle. That definitely wasn't a strong climb, so he's leaving wisely, leaving the slow gaggle and trying to find something strong so he can break away. Good for him. So he really jumps out there. So here he's made the turn at this point, and he's basically turning and going downwind. This is where Papa 7 probably wins the day. So he's in a 1 knot climb here at 886. Here comes the gaggle. I've got my hooks in on the gaggle now. I'm close enough to sort of see them and know what to expect. But what happens is a lot of guys push to the back of the cylinder really low, looking for a climb so they could take it downwind, and get low and don't make a lot of gain. Papa 790 breaks out early, and those two just take off and basically have a great day. Obviously, Whiskey 7 does something smart here because he's just a part of the pack at this point, and he flies well from that point on. And I think I just had a good first leg. My last lap here at the last two turn areas doesn't really go great, but I think I had a good start and a good first couple legs. So I pull in. I'm going to jump back over to myself. Wow, is this annoying if it's going to take me back to the beginning of the flight each time I try and make a change. Okay. So there, the group basically splits. This was a weak climb, and this group goes for the back, but they're low. X-Ray Charlie's down to 891, Hotel 7's down to 856, and I'm down to 915. So I know how weak it was back here before the start, and I'm just not confident that that distance is worth pushing low upwind when I could work with these guys, or maybe Mike Sierra here, and turn downwind and have that altitude to have a little bit more cushion to find a climb. There's plenty of time to soak into these next two turn areas. The conditions down here were pretty good. Remember, I found that big climb right here. Everything was fine. Why push super low into the low ground turbulence to try and find a climb and risk getting stuck and getting slow? So that's what was happening here at this point. I think it was a big moment in the task. Unfortunately for Mike Sierra and I, we lose touch with Papa 7 and 9-0. They find a big climb here, 2 meters a second for Papa 7, and I think 9-0 found the same climb. He hasn't jumped into it yet, so let's play forward just a little more. 9-0, where are you? Well, 9-0 only gets 1.3 meters out of it. So this is the climb that wins Papa 7 the day. 2 meters downwind. 9-0 doesn't get the same climb rate out of that. Whiskey 7 looks like they're in the same climb as well. Let's take a look here. Yeah, so there's Whiskey 7 and 9-0. Whiskey 7 gets 1.5, 1.3 for 9-0, but 2 meters a second for Papa 7. And I'm telling you, the reason he did this is he didn't go low. The climbs were easier to center and better the higher you went. So Papa 7 just touched, moved downwind, escaped the gaggle, which he knew was going to be greedy and do this US rules thing where they like to go to the back of the cylinder every time. So it's sort of an assigned task to the back corner, especially these small areas. And what Papa 7 did here is he left higher, he drifted downwind, he had more altitude and time, he centered a good climb, and that's it. He won the day. I'm with Mike Sierra here a little bit behind, and tried to connect with, be in a position where I could use some markers to find a climb, but everybody separated here. So there. Okay, so here we are. We're coming into the bottom of that climb, and we only get 0.9, so even less respectively than the 1.3 and 1.5 for these two, Whiskey 7 and 9-0, and I think Mike Sierra gets even a little weaker, 0.7. So the thermal has died, the bubble's gone. Papa 7 got it. We're the leeches who come in late into the garbage. We stop flying ourselves and looking for our own climbs. We're relying on an existing climb that's dead, wasting circles in it, and that's how Papa 7 wins this day. Should have flown ourselves downwind into the blue, felt for the climb, centered our own climb, and that would have been better. This gaggle behind here, they do escape, but they had a lot of risk going back there. They all got pretty low. So let's go back and look at, let's say, X-Ray Charlie, for example, who had a great day, but at this point he's down to 745 meters, and that's pretty low. That's down basically 2,000 feet, and that's difficult to find climbs that low on this particular day. It was better to stay a little higher, but he still made a good day out of it. So there we are, scraping around for climbs. Papa 7's off to the races, 9-0 and Whiskey 7, and that other gaggle comes in up below us. So they went a little further, but a lot of them lost a lot of distance and time here. X-Ray Golf catches up to us because we're not finding any strong climbs, and he's utilizing us a little bit. So smart flying on his part at this point. These guys get dropped a little bit, and you can see they got dropped on the score sheet just a little bit. But that moment there, coming in here, the big gaggle, and how everybody escaped here. I mean, look at this. Papa 7's high, 1,000 meters, way in the back corner of this, has all this space to turn, and time is run back into the finish. And that gaggle's half a leg behind. That was just almost just even with them here. So pretty impressive how different flying styles can, in different circumstances, can open up these tasks pretty quickly. Not a lot of points in it, but you sort of get the gist. All right, so back to us. Our group kind of comes together now. 5 Echo and X-Ray Charlie on the bottom of that group, X-Ray Golf and 7 Tango on the top, and then Mike Sierra 9-8 in the middle, Hotel 7 coming in from behind. And let's look. Yep, so here we are looking at Whiskey 7. There's Papa 7 down further to the south. And I'll zoom out here just a little bit so you can see. So I never really find a good climb again. It's probably 4 o'clock, 4:30 at this point. So I pair up with Jersey. Here we get 1.5. That's not terrible, but only for 200 meters. And we're up at 1176, so we're at a good altitude. And basically I'm just trying to get high enough to easily find a climb in this next turn area, drift it back, and go into the finish without having to make any turns on the upwind leg. Now X-Ray Jersey started about 10 or 15 minutes before, or sorry, X-Ray Golf Jersey Simplinski started about 10 minutes before me, so he's gonna be turning back much earlier. Zip this back here, and I've got to eat up more time. You can see Whiskey 7 and 9-0 all sort of form a gaggle here and go home together. There's where I believe 9-0 turns. So let me go back just a bit. So at this point, I'm probably at 2:35 on my clock on the clear nav, and just ideally, I'm at 866, so a little low. I wanted to be 3,000 or above. That was the good place to find a climb, and I just didn't do it. So rather than wasting too many turns here, I start to work back upwind. But the math on this right now is showing 29 kilometers per hour out of 39 degrees. That's a significant wind. That's 18 knots. So getting a climb and drifting it back downwind and using that distance, let's say I find a 2-knot climb, that 2-knot climb is kind of worth 4 knots because you're using it backwards. You're drifting downwind with it and getting that extra distance. If you take it on the upwind leg and then drift back downwind, that 2-knot climb is worth like half a knot. So there's a Cochrane article on that. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's really, really important, and especially in these low weekdays. But even though I didn't find it, I still did okay on the task, but this was the key for me. I think I could have maybe won this task or tied Gary if I would have found a good climb here on either of the turns down here, and I just wasn't lucky enough to find that climb. So I have to work back upwind and find a climb. And there's also quite a bit of sink on this upwind leg, late in the day especially. So the sink streets were massive. Here's 1.4 meters a second, so not bad, but that's probably worth less than a meter per second because it's drifting downwind. And I think I even have to take one more climb here. Yep. So there's a miss. So I'm struggling and afraid of the sink streets at this point. There's 1.3 meters a second, and I think that'll be final glide. Obviously, this group makes it home safely. There's Jay, and you can see this back group that started a little bit behind us really suffers because you can see it's quite weak at this point. So that is the sort of overview of the task. I'm not sure how much great information there is, but whoops, go back to there. So what I want to do is look at the statistics real quick for the task, and let me pull this up so we can look at respective flights. All right, so Papa 7, 50 mean LD for the straight flying. I like to look at that, and a 1.3 meter vario. average climb rate. Whiskey 7 at a 45 mean LD, but a 1.5 meter, so he's a good climber. A little less efficient in the runs, but he was with that gaggle, so that's okay because he was probably lining up the first half of the task. He was able to line up lift with the group. 7 Tango, 49 LD, so almost even with Gary. One less climb, or one less glide, and 1.3, so a little weaker than Gary. And that, a lot of that was actually probably that last climb where I took a knot and Gary took 1 meter per second. Gary took 2 meters a second. He found that climb on his own and found it at the perfect time, and that downwind stayed high. Got some extra distance and closed the deal. And just for the fun of it, let's look at Sean Murphy, X-Ray Charlie. So a little lower LD, but a very high climb rate. So a good climber. And Pete Alexander, I'm gonna guess very good LD and my same climb rate. And I think he's flying at about the same wing loading I was in this day. So, good glider and good pilot. So not a lot in it. I think Gary obviously whooped us pretty good, and that's why he had that 2K win. But in this scoring system and with this new formula, the experimental US rules formula that they're kind of selling to the FAI or trying to sell, so far New Zealand is using it, but I don't think any other countries are. Supposedly it has baked in to the algorithm the scoring formula, some sort of way of rewarding people for flying alone. And I just don't know how you can do that in an equation unless you're somehow giving someone a bonus for their distance from other gliders during the task. I need to ask the guys how that works. I would just like to use pure FAI rules, no screwing around, but somehow there's some hocus pocus going on here. Well, even though Gary led that gaggle, it looked like quite a bit, Sean Murphy as well, I'm not really sure how it rewarded them for that. I flew alone the entire time, but it's again, the scoring is just based on speed. And anyway, there's just not a lot of speed bonus here. I mean, so 78, that's 14K slower than Gary, and he still gets 527, so 80% of the score. That doesn't seem right. The spread seems like it should be bigger here, but I don't want to complain about the rules. I just wish we would all use the same rules internationally so we could all learn how choices and decisions and strategies and tactics affect scoring against our peers and friends with the exact same scoring system. And so now we're supposedly under quote unquote FAI rules, under the US rules under waiver, but they've already screwed around with the scoring system and they're using a different scoring equation. So with respect, this is extremely frustrating to me, and seems like an incredible waste of time. I just want to be using the same scoring system and the same parameters and not playing, the game of trying to change the world. So anyway, back to this. It was a fun day. It was a good first day. It was a great, well-called task. Congratulations to Jay for the idea, and for the task committee for adopting that. I think it was good. There were a couple landouts. You probably saw them in the background happening, a couple motor starts, that sort of thing. But yeah, this was a fun, challenging task. Gary flew very well, and this whole core group right here flew extremely well. And this is the gaggle right here. And the slowest guy is Sergey, 85, and the fastest guy, 92. But they stayed together for that first lap, and it's how they exited that top Bermuda High turn point that really made the difference here in the scores. So anyway, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to your comments. And let's wait a few days here, and I'll get you the second one. And thank you very much for watching. Talk to you soon.